And I'll say good morning the day before Memorial Day for all those that are able to join us on Facebook or YouTube. If you want to be reading along this morning, I'm not going to be reading from chapter 18 of Genesis. I'm going to cover a lot of material, so I'm going to be summarizing a lot of it. But if you want to be aware that we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 18, and what's happening in the life of Abraham and Sarah. But for a quick review, we've been following the life of the person who is spiritually admired historically more than any other person ever has. That is Abraham. And remember, at the beginning of his life, and as I summarize this, my encouragement is always to think, does this describe my life in any way? In my walk with Jesus, my spiritual journey, what does it have in common with what Abraham or any other Bible character, what do we have in common? What does that say about where I am and where I may be going? Remember, at the beginning of the journey, they're on their way to the promised land, to God's country, to salvation. But it's his father, Terah, who is leading. He's just going along for the ride. And I think for maybe many, if not all of us, beginning of our spiritual journey is tagging along with people that are leading us. This is the direction that we go. You know, I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't going to church. I was surrounded by people who were openly trying to follow Jesus. His father, Terah, doesn't make it all the way there, and now he finds himself the leader. He's the one who's now leading other people to God's country. And then when he gets there, there's famine. But wait a minute, I thought that once I finally get saved, all my problems are going to go away. Life won't be so hard anymore. God is going to answer all my prayers and fix everything. And out of desperation, Abram has to turn to the world as they go to Egypt in an effort to survive. And if you recall, as he goes there, he basically gives away his salvation, his relationship with God. Salvation, the picture of that is the countless offspring that they were going to have. And he gives away Sarai, her name at the time. And there they were. Abram, which means, exalted father. Sarai is my princess. So there's dad and there's princess. And all but giving it away. And it takes the world to say, what are you thinking? Any common decency would dictate you don't do anything like this. And so they send them on their way and they get back to God's country. And of course they get back there and what happens? Problems with family. There's not enough grass for everybody's animals. It's too crowded. And so there's Abram's family and there's his nephew Lot and his family, and they're not getting along. And so what does he do? He says, you take your pick. You decide what land you want, and I'll take what's left. Lot being the young fella, he goes, I want that pretty Jordan Valley, without realizing all the danger that's going to be waiting in store for him there. But it's green, there's water. And Abram, of course, says, you take what you want, I'll take what's left. And now he finds himself becoming a peacemaker. Okay, if I'm going to be a child of God, my goal is to be a peacemaker. Wherever I go, with whoever I'm dealing with, my goal is to bring about peace. And as we all know, there's a lot of people in this world that do not care much for peace. But that is central to his calling of God, is to be a peacemaker, right? So Lot takes off. He goes down to the probably the southern area of the Dead Sea, and there's all kinds of craziness going on. There are people fighting with each other, and Lot gets captured. and his people get captured, and Abram finds out about it, and what does he do? He goes down there and he rescues his nephew and their people and another people. And so now he finds, I'm not only a peacemaker, I'm now a rescuer. I don't just sit around and behave myself, but I go out into the world looking for people that need to be rescued. I don't just sit here and pass judgment on other people and their lifestyle. I go out looking. How can I help you? How can I rescue you from all that is happening in your life over which you have no control? And he is publicly recognized by the king and priest of Salem to become Jerusalem, to become Salem United Methodist Church, right? The city of peace, the Church of Peace. So now a peacemaker. I'm now a rescuer, he finds himself. And you follow this and you see he begins to challenge God more and more. How are you going to do this? I don't see how salvation is happening in my life. And again, what is the picture of salvation? But countless children. My princess is getting old. I'm already old. How is this going to happen? And they get into these little arguments with God. You remember that? And he's challenging God. I don't see how you can do that. Maybe we could kind of fudge a little bit. Maybe we can compromise a little bit. I'll get a son through one of our slaves. Yeah, technically it's my son, and so that will be how we'll do salvation. And so even after all he's accomplished, he's thinking, I really can't see how this can ever happen. And of course, whenever Abram hears about what God's going to do, what is his response? He laughs. What does Sarai do when she finds out? She laughs. You've got to be kidding. You know, I look at my life, I think about all of my failures, my shortcomings, my issues, and you're going to make a child of God out of this? This is one of the best jokes I've heard in a long time. I'm thinking when you feel like you need to laugh about the spiritual transformation that can take place in your life, you're probably hearing it clearly for the first time. God is capable of doing so much more than we realize, that if we really pay attention, it's just going to make me laugh. And he knows that, and he appreciates that, but he carries on with this. And of course, he grows in his relationship with God, and he has that special event where God appears to him, and they have the sacrifice of the animals, and it becomes sort of a communion sacrifice event where he says, I want you to appreciate how real this commitment has become. They institute the practice of circumcision. He said, you're ready to have a physical change in your life. A physical change, kind of like, and I alluded to this before, if you were going to have a sign across your forehead that would be there permanently, what would that sign say? He says, I want there to be a physical change in you that anybody, anywhere, could recognize that God's hand is upon your life. Now this is becoming real. Before this, I could go out in public and kind of act like everybody else, and they may not really know that back in the secret of my own space, I have this thing going with God. Now I can't hide it. I can't hide it anymore. So there's this change. And then they do this, he gets to the point where now we can change your name. Whenever you see somebody's name change in the Bible, something profound is happening. It's like you can't turn around now. Abram, my father, now becomes Abraham, which is the father of more people than you can count. He's going to be the father of nations. Sarai, my princess, now becomes Sarah. She is now the highest of royalty. She's everybody's princess, if you will. And you think about this, that in their name is the recognition that God's saving grace is going so far beyond themselves that you won't be able to count all the people it's going to touch. Well, wait a minute. I wanted to follow Jesus so he would fix my problems and he and I could have a really good time together and we could just ride this out in peace and quiet. Could it be that we have never really appreciated the extent to which God's saving grace is going to go through you and me and touch the lives of people we will never be face to face with? Do we really appreciate how great the saving grace of God is? And I don't think we know. I don't think we realize how far it is going to go. But he says, okay, now I'm going to put it in your name. Now for the rest of history, when people hear the name Abraham and Sarah, they will always be reminded that you have no idea where the saving grace of God is going to end. Things are really happening. They're really coming together. Well, how well are they coming together? Well, we're really going to see a big test when we come to chapter 18. They're living out in the desert. And it's the middle of the afternoon, so what are they doing? What do you do in the desert in the middle of the afternoon? What's that? You sit still. You don't move. You don't do anything. If you've never been in the desert in the middle of the afternoon, you know exactly what's going on. You are sitting there in the heat of the day. That's why much of the world, everything shuts down in the middle of the afternoon. It is so hot. It is dangerously hot. Our goal is to survive. And so he's just sitting there waiting for the heat to do its thing eventually. And along come 3 visitors. 3 visitors come walking out of nowhere. And what does Abraham do? He runs up to them. He welcomes them. Let me give you something to drink. Let me get you something to eat. No, wait. Let me get you a lot to eat. Sarah, let's get a banquet started here. We have visitors. We're out here in the middle of the desert and three people show up out of nowhere and we are going to treat them better than family. And they do. They take care of them. Whatever they need, they care for them. And as they're visiting, as they're talking, it turns out these aren't just 3 ordinary people, but they are what? Angels. They're angels. I thought we had 3 people here, but it turns out they're angels. It kind of dawns on them that there's something more going on here. But I've got 3 angels that I'm dealing. Angel, of course, means messenger. There's messages that are showing up here in our midst. We miss that because we call them angels, which is a transliteration, but they're messengers. And as they're talking with these angels, it begins to dawn on them that they're in the presence of God. God is showing up here. Could it be that that's kind of how God works? Do you ever find yourself in a situation where I'm dealing with people, but then all of a sudden God's message is happening in a way that I didn't really see coming, and maybe end up being in the presence of God himself. And I didn't realize it, but I was there. And this is what's going on. He's recognizing that God is there. And he does everything he can. If you live in the desert, like they did, what is the number one aspect of morality or ethics that would identify you as a child of God? What is the most decent thing that a person does that lives in the desert that sets you apart as a godly person? Anybody here ever live in the Middle East desert? The one thing that really sets you apart is that you take care of visitors. When somebody shows up your door and you have no idea who they are, you take them in, you protect them, you provide for whatever needs they have. You care for them as much as you would that they were family. That was the ultimate sign that you were a child of God, by the way you treated somebody you never met before in your life. And he does that. And so they have this time of fellowship, and so now it's ending, and it's time for us to move on. Should we tell them what we're off to do? Maybe we should tell them. Okay, well, we're on our way down to the area of Sodom and Gomorrah. Why are we going down there? Should we tell him? He's a man of God. He probably should know. It turns out that God was receiving prayers from people that evil had become so profound down there that they are in need of the judgment of God. And it's probably going to call for total destruction. Because sometimes, can it be that evil becomes so deeply entrenched in a person's life, in a society? It's kind of like sometimes a machine can be so messed up and so broken you can't fix it, but you have to take it apart and start all over again. The rumors are this is what's going on down there, that people have become so profoundly evil, their only hope is for God to come in, do away with this, and start all over again. Oh my goodness. Abraham, and I'm sure Sarah are thinking, what? We have relatives down there. We've heard about what life is like down there, but we've got Lot. We've got family there. What about them? And then this very interesting interaction starts up when Abraham goes to God and he says, what if, I know I'm acting very boldly here, but if I may, as politely as I can, suppose, and I know you would never, everything you do is righteous and just, God, but what if there were like 50 righteous people in that city? You wouldn't destroy those people with the evil, would you? And he, no, I wouldn't. You're right, I wouldn't do that. Oh, dear God, please forgive me for being so bold. But what if there were 40? I wouldn't do it if there were 40. 30, we'll whittle our way all the way down to 10. And he plays this little game with God. And he finally, if I can find 10, I will spare them. And I honestly believe that this little interaction between Abraham and God is a sign. It really shows you where their relationship is. Where he can now challenge God. And God says what? Bring it. Let's do this. I want you to come to me before you go to anyone else. Whatever it is you want. If you want to challenge me, if you want to question me, if you want to encourage me, Bring what you are to me, because that's what our relationship has become. Does God invite us into that kind of relationship where we can sit down with God and we can think and reason? Could it even be that God is encouraging him to think? Now, historically, and you'll see this in other places in the Bible, where the people of God are presented as being thinking people. They reason about things. They analyze things. They calculate. They use this incredible gift of a mind, this amazing ability to do reasoning and rational thinking. Did you ever thank God for your ability to think? And then I go, God, why don't I use this gift more? But you see this all the way through. You look at the way Jesus deals with the people around him, the thinking that goes in to knowing who he's dealing with and what he's trying to communicate and accomplish and how he goes about saying that. It's an amazing thing to see. And so historically, for thousands of years, the people of God are the people that think. They are the smart people. They don't take pride in showing up to any situation and taking their mind and setting it on the shelf and let's just go with what we feel like doing. Or, well, I'll do whatever I'm told to do because it's what I'm supposed to do. I know that God gave me this brain to think, but it's telling me to think differently than what others are saying. It's just an encouragement to be thinking, God, could it be that even when I am worshiping, that my ability to think is a part of that experience? But off they go. They go down, probably again down to the southern area, around the southern end of the Dead Sea, and the men show up, the angels, God himself shows up, and received by Lot. And what happens when they get there? But they encounter an entire society of people that the moment they find out about them, they want to use them, abuse them, and throw them away. And Lot knows these people, so he does, and there's this desperate, frightening event where they try to get these three messengers of God into safety, and they end up trying to get out of they have to get out of the town, the city, because of the danger that they are in. And now we see for the first time what's really going on here. That what they were willing to do with people that they had never ever met before. Now you're going to hear a lot of things. My whole life I've heard people talk about this story and what was wrong with them. And I think that they, for the most part, have missed what's really going on here. What just happened before they have to escape with their lives? They just came from the home of Abraham and Sarah. Two people they have never even heard of, and what happens? What is the most important thing you can ever do as a godly person in the desert? Is you take in whoever comes walking along, because they are this close to death. I never understood this until I spent time in the Southwest hiking. And you begin to understand why every year people die just going out on a hike. Abraham and Sarah, truly godly people, they encounter somebody who are truly foreign to them, and they take care of them as if they are family. And in contrast to these godly people, you have a society that when they see somebody they don't know, they are something to be used, something to be abused, and something to be thrown away. And that was their sin. You know, You see my tie. Tomorrow's Memorial Day. How many people have died, have sacrificed their lives to save other people in this world? You know? They claim it's over 600,000 people in the life of this country. Over 600,000. I guarantee you there's more than that. That have sacrificed everything for a greater cause. And I was thinking about that, and tomorrow I'll be in Marshall, Illinois, playing music, honoring Memorial Day, and I found myself thinking, why do we do this every year? And I told myself, I tell you why the reason is that historically I look back and I grew up in the light of the Second World War, and I think about the times when people sacrificed themselves for a greater cause, sometimes virtually saving the world as we know it. And I have always been so inspired by what they did. And then it dawned on me that I can't ride on their sacrifice, but it turns out that every generation is going to have to make the very same choice. How do I see foreigners? How do I see people that I don't know? How do I respond when there are people over there do I see them as objects to be used, as enemies, to be abused, and objects to be thrown away? Or will my nation, my country, recognize other people in this world as people that I might be willing to die for? That's a decision every generation is going to have to make. And so I'll be praying for our nation tomorrow, that one nation under God won't simply be something we stick on money or in a song or whatever, but it will be a choice that we are going to make and will be inspired by people like Abraham and Sarah. Because judgment comes upon Sodom and Gomorrah, completely destroyed, as if a volcano just empties itself upon them. And to this day, we're not even sure where they were at, because they were so completely destroyed. But we as a nation, we as God's people, will be making the same kind of choices. Heavenly Father, my prayer this morning is that we would recognize, as we hear about these people in Genesis, that it is our story too. And I pray that you would give us the courage and the willingness to depend upon you to be the people you have called us to be, no matter what the cost. May all that happen in Jesus' name. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 700, and I invite you to turn to number 700. We will sing the first and the verses 1 and 4. I'll say goodbye to those who have been able to join us this morning. God bless you all. I hope you have the opportunity to observe Memorial Day. Hope to see you soon. Bye.